Welcome to the Fantasy Draft Room. I'm Cody Smith at Cody Smith TFDR on X. And if y'all want access to this sheet, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. There's more in-depth stats as well. And there's total rankings and everything like that. If y'all want to use it for yourself for any of your drafts or anything, again, projections are not rankings, but you can use it to help guide some of your decisions. So if you want access to that, in the description, click on the link, request access, and it is completely free. I'll give you all access to it. But for today, we continue the AFC North projections with the Cincinnati Bengals, and we can do so by getting into the offensive historicals for this team. Luckily for us, one of the teams that really doesn't have too much change in this team and how the offense is going to operate. This team has been ran by Zach Taylor for the last 5+ years, 4+ years, it feels like, whatever the number is that Zach Taylor has been the head coach of this team. And really, we do have a offensive coordinator change that happened from 2023 to 2024 with Brian Callahan to Dan Pritchard, but Zach Taylor is running this team. So we can now get into the 3-year average for those offensive historicals in our big 6 categories. We have 626 3-year average for the total number of passing attempts, 387 rushes, 320 of those going to the running back, 108 running back targets, 376 wide receiver targets, and 121 for the tight end. If we're looking at any changes, if those have gone across the years or from at least 2023 to 2024, we can see that the total number of passing attempts increased from 615 to 652 as this team had to play behind a lot with that bad defense on the other side. The total number of rushes stayed about the same. RB targets went up. The wide receiver targets have been pretty much consistent. But the interesting thing I think here, most interesting, is the tight end targets have increased each of the last 3 years from 92 to 115 to 155 in 2024. And that's obviously driven a lot by Mike Gesicki, and we'll get into him at the very end of this episode. But I think that's all that we have to do for the offensive historicals. We can then get into the Joe Burrow stat line. And I have him coming in here at 622 total passing attempts. For the last 3 years, he led the league in passing attempts last year at 652 over that 17-game pace. But the other 2 years before, he's only played in 10 and 16 games, and those have resulted in 606 and 16 games for passing attempts and 365 passing attempts in 10 games for Joe Burrow. So the 622 number is where we resulted at after doing everything and merging all the numbers together for Joe Burrow. And then we can get into the total number of completions that result from that, driven by the completion percentage of 67.52%. The last 3 years for his completion percentage, he actually is the career total indicator, all-time career record holder, at least in Pro Football Reference, for the minimum number of attempts, however they do that number. But he is the all-time career record holder for that completion percentage with those minimum number of attempts. 68% in 23, 66% in 24, or 68% in 22, 68%, 66% in 23, and 70% at his almost career high. Yes, it was his career high last year, 70.6, just barely eking out the 2021 season at 70.6%. So that's going to come in here at 67.52, just a little bit of a tick down from last year. And then we can look at how many yards are created off of those 420 completions. Let's look at the yards per attempt number first at 7.42. Last 3 years for him has been at 7.4, 6.3, and 7.5. So the 7.4 number feels right in between that 2023 or 2022 and 2024 season. The yards per completion, about the same thing. Those numbers in that 2022-2024 season were 10.8 and 10.7. We have them coming in here at 10.99, so just a little bit of an increase there. And then that results in 35 touchdowns because of a touchdown percentage that comes in for the last 3 years at 5.8, 4.1, and 6.6 touchdowns thrown per passing attempt. So this number at 35 feels just about right for Joe Burrow. Last year, that number did rise to a league-leading 43 touchdowns. Obviously, a outlier of the historicals for Joe Burrow. His 35 passing touchdowns was the highest that he had ever done in that 16-game season in 2022. So we bring him back down to that 35 touchdown numbers and then 11 total interceptions on the year. We know that he is more of a pocket passer, coming in at 37 rushing total attempts on the 17-game pace here. The only really outlier year for Joe Burrow was in that 2022 season where he had 75 rushes in 16 games in 2022, but every other year he hasn't eclipsed 42 rushes on the ground. So I have him coming in here at 37 rushes. The 144 yards is going to be based off that yards per attempt number that came in at 3.89. And for the last couple of years for the yards per attempt number on the ground, Joe Burrow's been at a 3.4, 2.8, and 4.8. So 3.89 is just kind of averaging those together to result in, again, that 144 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground has been pretty historically average for Joe Burrow. I think there was a year where he had 0, but a 2 to 5 range has been pretty much where he's been sitting at. With that, we can then move into the running backs. But before we do, just to look at it really quick, a total position rank overall for Joe Burrow on that 17 games at quarterback 5, which probably fits my dynasty ranks as well. I do have the Jalen Hurts above him just because the rushing floor he provides. I kind of understand just because every year he's been healthy, Joe Burrow's been very, very good as a pocket passer as we accidentally scroll up a little bit. But I would have him at quarterback in Dynasty 5, and he comes in here and in my projections as quarterback 5 for the 2025 season as well. With the running backs, the only one that we're really going to focus on here is Chase Brown. The other ones are just kind of ancillary. We could look at the Zach Moss. I have Zach Moss and Taj Brooks here coming in as kind of this orange question mark highlighted value of just like, I don't know exactly what Zach Moss is going to be, almost coming off of what felt like a career potentially ending neck injury last year for Zach Moss. For now, I'm still going to have him as the secondary rusher for this team, but pretty up in the air with these last 3 of Zach Moss, Samaje Perine, and Taj Brooks as to where those rushing numbers lead out to. But the only one that we really need to focus on for fantasy purposes, at least, or for the total number of offensive carries for this team, is on Chase Brown. And I have him coming in here at 260 attempts on the ground for 2025. Last year was his best year by far. He's only played 2 years in the league. First year was 44 attempts, but he jumped that number all the way up to 229 rushes on the ground in 16 games. I have him taking over even a more extensive workload in this backfield, where if we're looking at it again, the RB rushes for this team on a 3-year average was 320. I have it now at 359, hoping that this team can be a little bit more balanced with their pass to run rate. And if so, then Chase Brown will be the primary benefactor of that. But 260 attempts on the ground. If we're looking at his yards per attempt numbers, those have been 4.1 and 4.3 over his first 2 years. So just a little bit below that number at 4.2 results in him having 1,095 yards on the ground. And then the 8 touchdowns last year, he put up 7. Again, if you change to a little bit more of just a run-heavy scheme, he can probably get that number easily up to 8 if he just falls in the end zone one more time. And especially as the total touchdowns passing number comes down, probably has to be put in a little bit more to the rushing touchdowns on the ground. For Chase Brown, 51 total targets. That number is going to come from last year. He actually had 65 targets, which is a pretty drastic increase. But I think that number comes down a little bit, basically always or almost all driven by the fact that you add Samaje Perine back to the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I do think that that is where he excels most at as a player, especially at this point in his career. So I brought the Chase Brown targets down and gave a good amount of those to Samaje Perine. Again, if we're looking at the total number of RB targets, 108 on the 3-year average, 101 last year. So that number comes in at 99, just a little bit below last year's. But Samaje Perine being that more third down back style, if they want to use him in that way in this offense. But that gives Chase Brown 51 targets. And then looking at his reception rate, just to get the total number of receptions that he might have projected coming into 2025 or over the course of 2025, catch rate has been really, really good for Chase Brown. 93% in his rookie year, 83.1% in 2024. So that number comes in at 80.39. It's a little bit below anything he's posted, but just on RB averages, that number is typically between a 75 and 80%. So still at the high range of running back reception rates, resulting in the 41 receptions. Yards per reception came in at 7.63. And if we're looking at the last couple of years for Chase Brown in that, he was at 11.1 in his rookie year and 6.7 in his second year in the league. So there's a drastic increase here from 14 receptions in 23 to 54 in 2024. So if we're just bumping that back up a little bit, we get him in at 7.63, resulting in 313 yards through the air and the 2 touchdowns. Again, we're not going to get into too much more of the running backs. If you want to move these around any way you want, I know a lot of people are very excited about the rookie Taj Brooks, but until he shows me through training camp, we're getting into that really over the course of this week, next week, we'll start to see a lot more with this team and hopefully get some more clarity about who the RB2 is. I think Samaje Perine will still get some of those carries, and then again, that third down role. But we can then move into the wide receiver room, and the only three that we're going to talk about here are the big three: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Andre Yoshivas. I do still have T. Higgins only coming in at 13 games, just because he hasn't historically shown me that he can really be healthy through a 17-game season. So this is going to drive a little bit of the variance, and especially why Jamar Chase can't have 168 targets. So let's go into that number for Jamar Chase. He led the league in receptions last year and yards and touchdowns. Again, our Triple Crown leader of last year in 2024. But he had that on 175 targets, not leading in targets, but was still the Triple Crown leader in yards, receptions, and touchdowns. So from 175 last year, we bring that total passing attempt rate down a little bit. We bring down the targets for Jamar Chase as well. 168 feels like a pretty good number. Looking at his reception rate for the last 3 years, Jamar Chase has been at a catch rate of 64, 69, and 72% with a career average of 67.9. We come in with him here a little bit closer to that 70% number, just under that, resulting in 117 catches through the air. The yards per reception number for Jamar Chase, 12.92. That's been a lot higher in years past, if I remember right off the top of my head. Yes, it has in his rookie year, but he's actually increased that number each of the last 3 years. The rookie number was insane at 18 yards per reception, but he's now increased that number each of the last 3 years from 12 to 12.2 to 13.4. I can see a little bit of regression here from that 13.4 number down to a 12.92, which gives him 15-12 through the air and 13 total touchdowns. Last year, he led the league again in receiving touchdowns at 17. His rookie year was the next highest at 13, and we put him back down to that number as the total number of passing touchdowns for Joe Burrow also comes back down to a little bit of negative regression for him. But that still results in Jamar Chase being my projected wide receiver 1 for 2025. For T. Higgins, again, we're only putting in 13 games here. The splits between these two guys, if they did play a full 17 together, would probably be a lot closer, and is one of the reasons why I do still really like T. Higgins, even though he is hurt. On a points per game basis, very, very good. This is his total rank, not his points per game rank. So that's a very big distinction to make at wide receiver 32. And points per game, a lot higher. Definitely think that these two can easily be two top 10 wide receivers again in the league. But I have him here in 13 games, 117 targets. That number for T. Higgins. Last year, if we're looking at that, in 12 games, he had 109 total targets. So in 13 games, let's get him up to 117. Looking at his catch rate now at 62.39%. His catch rate for the last 3 years has been 67.9, 55.3, and 67, with a career average of 64.5. So just a little bit below the career average at 62.39%, results in him having 73 not touchdowns. That would be a little bit broken, but 73 receptions. The 13.14 number for his yards per attempt lines up pretty well with his historicals. His career average has been 13.9. Last year was 12.5, as this offense got a little bit shorter in that for T. Higgins for the yards per attempt number. But his career high has been 15.6 in 2023. So a little bit of a positive regression there for T. Higgins, coming in at 13.14 and 8 touchdowns in only 13 games. T. Higgins, a very, very good number 2. He had 10 touchdowns last year. Again, we just bring that number down a little bit as we expect a little bit of regression for this offense. Coming in again at total number over a 17-game number, he's still wide receiver 32, which is pretty wild for him. With the other receivers, I know there's a little bit of good news and some fluff pieces coming out about Jermaine Burton being a little bit more locked in this year, a little bit more of a professional, a little bit more mature maybe. But I do think this offense is still going to be consolidated, and I still have Andre Yoshivas being the wide receiver 3 for this team with his 76 targets over the course of 2025. And if we're looking at that number last year, it was 61 targets. I think that he commands even more of a consolidated wide receiver 3 workload. I think Trenton Irwin is probably the biggest one that left this offense and is going to open up some targets for Andre Yoshivas. And so I have him coming in here with 76 targets at a 61.84 catch percentage. That number has been a career average of 59.3 in his first 2 years in the league for him. So just a little bit of a bump up there to result in the 47 catches, 516 yards through the air on 10.98 yards per reception. He jumped up last year all the way to 13.3 from 7.7 in his rookie year. So I have those two kind of averaging out to where we only have him at 10.98. And the 5 touchdowns. His rookie year, he had 4. Last year, he had 6. Let's middle those two numbers. And we get Andre Yosevich coming in at wide receiver 66 for 2025. Kind of like the wide receiver room, I don't expect too much competition for Mike Gesicki as he really took over the passing work in this offense in 2024. I expect that to continue or even grow in 2025. And then I do have just these ones highlighted down here. I have no idea if Eric All is even going to be able to play this year. Tanner McLaughlin, the other rookie that they drafted last year, and then Tanner Hudson coming in at only 11 games played because of just the injury historicals for him. But again, the only one that we really need to focus on here, in my opinion, is Mike Gesicki. I have him coming in here at 94 total targets on the year. Last year, he was at 83 in 17 games. And I hope that this offense gets even more consolidated as they really figure out who their best packages are, what the best packages are that they can use on the field. I think that they should consolidate this offense even more than what they have historically used. So I'm trying to bump him up here to 94 total targets, 75.53% on his catch rate. Last year with Joe Burrow, that number was 78.3, so just a little bit lower coming on the 2025 season, gives him the 71 catches, 10.13 yards per reception. Last year was 10.2, so pretty much baseline, staying even there for Mike Gesicki. Gives him 719 total yards through the air and 4 touchdowns for the season. Last year he only had 2. There's a lot of touchdowns that probably go to some of the Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson's over the course of the year. Again, trying to consolidate this offense a little bit more. Gives him a very, very good tight end number, well above where he's currently being drafted or ranked in Dynasty at tight end 9. I do think a top 12 tight end season is in the projection of outcomes for Mike Gesicki. And that will wrap up the entire team for the Cincinnati Bengals. So one more time, going through the entire team, 622 passing attempts for 420 completions, 4,614 yards to the air for 35 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Even did not know that this number came out like this, but sometimes it just works. Even 400 rushing attempts on the ground for 1,637 yards and 12 touchdowns there. And that will come out to 1,022 plays for 47 total touchdowns for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you like this one, leave a like on the video. If you don't like it, definitely don't leave a like. I'm not going to ask you to do something that you don't believe in. But if you do want to keep seeing these videos come out, they will keep dropping each of the next, I have no idea how many more days I have, but we're doing 32 teams in 32 days. So we are now on, I believe this is the 10th day of the series. We'll have, I guess, then 22 more days as we're doing some quick math live here. But I hope you follow along with it. If you find it useful, again, if you want the sheet, if you want access to it, it will be in the description below. And I will see you all tomorrow for the next video. Thanks.